So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And welcome to everybody here this morning. We're very happy that you are here. We're about to start some exceptional panels with exceptional speakers on some very important issues today. But I do want to start with a health and safety moment, because that's what we normally do in these meetings. So the first health issue is tap water is good, right? So I'm putting it on that. We're talking to a number of our water suppliers here. The tap water that we provide to all of our residents here and businesses in the Bay Area is fantastic. And from a safety moment, there's been a heck of a lot of money that's been put into the infrastructure for our water supply. And that is a key safety issue within the Bay Area. We know we're in a risk-prone area from earthquakes and other hazards. And I want to commend all the water districts and then the public for voting in measures to keep our safety measures up top. So unless you have been so in tune with the San Francisco Giants' run to the World Series, and you haven't been paying attention, we're in a political climate right now. But one of the things that hasn't really been talked about, even though the economy has been certainly discussed quite a bit, is how important the issue about water is to the economy. Well, our panel this morning is going to be focusing on that. It's going to be talking about, as Alex mentioned, a very important word, the reliability, and then how important supplying this water is to our economic engine here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So with that, I am pleased to introduce our panelists. And I'm going to ask each of them when they speak, and we're going to speak in order from where I am all the way down to Fran at the end. That's going to be our order this morning to give more of their bio. But I will do a quick introduction right now. To my left, your right, Cindy Tuck, Deputy Executive Director for Government Relations for the Association of California Water Agencies. Next to Cindy, we have Frank Maitski, the Deputy Operating Officer for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. Then Michael Thompson, the General Manager for the Sonoma Valley Water Agency. And Fran Spivy-Weber, the Vice Chair for the State Water Resources Control Board. So how we're going to do this morning is each panelist will have about 10 minutes. Some of them have slides that will be operating, others will not. After that period of about 40 or 45 minutes, we will open it to questions from the audience and also have dialogue between the panelists. I've instructed the panelists actually to pay attention to what each other says, because we're going to try and have a little bit of a lively discussion here. I'm sure there's some commonalities and there may be some differences. For those in the audience, if you do have questions, there will be these blue question cards that will either be floating around. If you don't have it right now, we'll be passing them around. Just raise your hand if you'd like some. I encourage you to do that. We'll be bringing those up here, and then I'll be reading them from the front. One reason for us to do that is so that, no, not that I can just pick the ones I want, but that but we can get them correctly done, and we can be concise, and then provide the speakers with those questions as well. We'll try and finish right about at 9:45. We'll have a 15-minute break, and then we'll go into our next panel on water. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cindy Tuck, who will open up our panel.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, Scott. I want to thank the Bay Planning Coalition for the invitation to be here, particularly John Coleman, who is ACWA's Vice President. What I'm going to cover in my time is, first I'm going to start with a little background information about ACWA, the Association of California Water Agencies. That'll help you understand my perspective. Then I'm going to talk about the issues that the panel is addressing. I'm going to touch on them at the 100,000-foot level, and then the other panelists will take it from there and go into more depth. At the end of my comments, I'll touch on the water bond that will hopefully be on the ballot in 2014 and give you a little bit of information on that. So to start, I'm going to talk about ACWA, and we are the largest coalition of public water agencies in the country. We've been in existence for about 100 years. I've only been there a year and a half or so, but ACWA's been around for just over 100 years. We have nearly 450 members, and they are responsible, or in their work, they provide 90% of the water to businesses in California, to the public, and to agriculture. And so it's a big job that our water districts have. Our mission is to help the water agencies. We help them with the development, actually promoting the development, the management, and the reasonable beneficial use of water. They do that. They provide good quality water in the lowest cost, lowest practical cost, and they do it in an environmentally balanced manner. And I think Alex's presentation talking about East Bay Mud was a perfect example of that, showing the type of work they do to provide safe water and do it in an environmentally balanced way, and try to do it at the lowest practical cost that they can. So getting to the issue that's before our panel, which is water supply and pricing, and does that affect economic development? And I'm just going to start with the conclusion that it does affect economic development. And a particular important part about water supply and pricing is having reliable water supply. And that you'll hear me emphasize that as I go through my comments today. The need for businesses, if we're going to have economic development, we need to have a reliable water supply. And if you think about it, this will all sound pretty obvious, but if you think about manufacturing, if you're a manufacturing company, you're trying to produce whatever it is, if it's iPad, for example, you have a certain number of output, you need a certain amount of water to make those products. You need a reliable supply of water. If you're agriculture and you're producing all the wonderful fruits and vegetables and other commodities that we get to enjoy in California, and of course ag in California feeds the nation and to a large degree part of the world, they need a reliable supply of water. And then if you look at the housing industry, for example, to have new residential developments, they need a reliable supply of water. You can't have houses built and then the people don't have drinking water there. So those are three examples of why, or just that in the real world, having that reliable supply is critical. So moving on, as customers, we go to the tap. I did this morning. You go to the tap, you turn on the water. We just rely on it. We don't even think twice about it. You expect to have safe, wonderful water come out of the tap, and it does. But there's a lot of work that goes behind that. And one thing you should know is that state law, because there were problems in the past for businesses in economic development, the housing industry, manufacturing, that in some cases there wasn't enough water. That the legislature put provisions into state law that says when we have a new project being considered, they have to evaluate whether there'll be enough water there to meet the demand for the project for the next 20 years. So that's actually in state law on the business side and residential side. Now, when you look at business development, we have a couple of water districts here. They are AQUA members. They're from Northern California, and I thought in preparing for this, I would touch bases with one of our members in Southern California, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and I asked them, what do you hear when you talk with businesses in Southern California about economic development? And what they told me was, in connection to water, there's three factors that they focus on, and one is price, one is reliability, and another one is quality. Particularly if you're in manufacturing, the quality of the water can be very critical to producing a particular product. So those are the three factors that they hear about from the businesses. And today, in part, we're focused on price, and I thought I'd mention what some of the drivers are. Each of us, we pay our bill to our water district, but do we really know, what goes into that besides just the water, that the molecules of water that we enjoy? Some of the factors that affect cost are, for example, the treatment costs. And as a water district, you have to comply with different standards that the state, for example, sets. And often those standards are becoming more and more stringent. So you have to change the treatment system, and that costs money. Another factor that we face is aging infrastructure. Alex mentioned in his presentation about some of the facilities go back many, many years. And now our treatment plants, pipes that provide the water, They are decades old now. And the water districts, in order to be able to provide reliable water supply, they often, of course, they have to maintain the systems, but sometimes they have to upgrade them, and they have to develop new ones. Alex mentioned the Freeport facility. And if you're ever in Sacramento near Freeport, I recommend stopping off and seeing that facility. It's a very impressive facility. There's art built into it. You can get there by bike, walking. It's just a gorgeous facility and really done well to protect the environment and provide the water for the future. But we have to have new infrastructure, and that costs a lot of money. Another factor is energy costs. Energy is a significant cost for water districts. Another factor that you may not think about is invasive species. How many of you have heard of quagga mussels? Oh, okay, a lot of folks. And, quagga mussels and other types of invasive species are huge problems for water districts. They can really clog up the pipes, and for one water district, the cost to control them can be millions of dollars for a year. So that's a big factor. And then, of course, the water districts are developing new supplies, recycling, for example, and other types of methods, desalination, that costs money. On pricing, prices have gone up. If you look at money from the state water, or prices for the state water project money in 1990, that was $250 per acre foot. About in 1990. Nowadays, if you look at desalination, water recycling, that can be about $1,000 per acre foot. But think about what a good value water is. If you think about a gallon of wine, not that any of us should be drinking a gallon of wine, the value of that, costs about $45. If you go to your favorite coffee place down the street, that gallon's about $16. If you buy individual bottled water, a gallon of that adds up to about $11 or $12. What does a gallon of water cost from your tap? It's a fraction of a penny. It's less than half a penny for that gallon of water. So it's a really good value. And as a service, if you think about your water bill, how much you pay for the drinking water versus how much you pay for your cell phone and how much you pay for your cable bill, it is a good value. A couple other things I want to emphasize. One, water supply is critical for business, drinking water, and agriculture, but it's also critical for ecosystems. And the state is working on that challenge of how do we meet both of those goals? Because we've got to meet both of them at the same time, and I'm sure Fran will talk about that. And we're lucky to have Fran at the state board to help face that kind of huge challenge. The legislature passed, I have 1 minute, I'll just note that the legislature passed a package in 2009. Keep drinking the water, this is good. That required in the Delta that we improve our water supply reliability, but also work to enhance the Delta. That package included a bond, should be on the ballot in 2014, that will help fund some of the work for supply reliability. And with that, Scott, I'll conclude.
All right, very good. Thank you, Cindy. So we will continue to move down through our panelists, and then we'll open up for questions. Remember, the blue cards will be collected, sign those, and we'll collect those afterwards. So, Frank, I'd like to introduce you.
Sure. Frank Maitski with the Santa Clara Valley Water District. By way of introduction, I oversee a number of engineers and planners and environmental scientists that support the operation and maintenance of our water utility. Included in that are two key areas that are fundamental to this discussion. One is our electrical engineering group, who oversees our energy management program, and also our planning group that does the long-range planning for water supply and for our district. And so they kind of connect. This is a picture of the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley from our perspective. As you can see, The reason I wanted to show this because, and I think we've talked about it a lot before, and really tying water supply in with the economy, again, it's been said already, but it really is the reliability of that water supply is very important. So what you see here is really in the foreground, you see the heavy urbanized area of Santa Clara County. That's where a lot of high-tech firms are, a large population. And so that really is it's important to make sure that that keeps running, and water supply is important to that. But also, the reason I wanted to show that is underneath all that urban area lies a natural resource that's fundamental to our water supply. That's our groundwater basin. And everything, when you talk about water supply management in our county, it begins and ends with the groundwater basin that's beneath that urban area. And so really to kind of tell the story of that, this is a chart that we use, and that really what you see is a green line on the right is the population as it grew from the early part of the 20th century to today. The blue line is the groundwater level over time. And so as you can see, the early part of the farmers in the 1920s and whatnot, as they overdrafted the groundwater basin, they realized there was a problem. They actually, in 1929, they began our organization. And what they did is first they built some of the local dams and reservoirs. And you can see the groundwater level goes up into the 1940s, and then when the population starts to boom again you see an overdraft of the groundwater basin after World War II. We built a few more reservoirs in the 50s. That helps a little bit. Then it really drops as the urbanization really takes off and the high-tech area really starts to grow. And then from there, the way we've recovered from there is our first deliveries of imported water become in the 1960s through the State Water Project. We recover again as population's growing. We're still struggling, and finally, we see we get deliveries from the Federal Central Valley Project. So we have imported water from both of those areas, and we see the groundwater recovering. The other important line that's shown too is the orange line you can see at the very top of that. That really represents the land surface elevation, and part of it kind of gets lost now because we've somewhat taken care of that problem for quite a while now. But in the early part of the history of water supply is we had a lot of land subsidence in there. In fact, it was about 13 feet in parts of San Jose that the land actually dropped between 1915 and 1970. And so that causes a lot of problems when it happens. We're also the flood management agency for the county. That creates we do have areas, as Jim Fiedler mentioned, that are below sea level now that we are protected by levees. There's also structural damage to any buildings when that occurs as well. So it's very important economically that we prevent subsidence from occurring in the future. This is a look of our water supply system today. You see our local reservoirs, and we have two imported water sources, one from San Luis Reservoir, our federal project, and from the north, from the State Water Project. Our pipelines. We also have 3 treatment plants, and our primary role is to recharge the groundwater basin. What we do, though, is we only have so much capacity to do that, so we've had to build treatment plants, and we're a wholesaler, basically. We sell treated water then to our retailers and also charge them for pumping the water out of the groundwater basin that we put there. So it's a very reliable system. It's very flexible. We have backup systems and whatnot. We're not if one part of the system has a problem, we usually have the ability to recover from other parts of our system, and so we're fortunate in that respect. Turning to energy now, as was mentioned, we're not as fortunate as East Bay Mud. We don't get our water from a reservoir and it flows by gravity. We actually have to pump out of the delta. And as you see there's 2 pie charts here. First, the one is just on the total energy on the left is the components of where we spend our energy, and the right is what the cost of that is. And there's a difference there. But first, I just want to start on the left-hand side. That big purple blob is really all the power that we use to import water from the delta. We talk about Southern California, Northern California. One way to define it is who pumps water south from the delta. And if you use it from that perspective, Southern California really starts at our county and Livermore and those kind of places. So we're similar to actually Met from that perspective. But really, to get back to this, 90% of the energy that we use is really to pump water into our valley. And then the rest of it is for water treatment in our offices and in terms of our area. Now, in terms of cost, so that's not quite. It's only about 70% of their cost spent on energy is for pumping water. And that's because the same projects also produce hydroelectric power similar to East Bay Mud, and they use that power to go back to the system to pump the water. And so probably that charge is about 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour in terms of the actual pumping water into the county. Then what we also do, I think kind of a unique situation for us, is we've joined a joint powers authority called PURPA, for short, the Power and Water Resources Pooling Authority. And what that is, it's a bunch of water utilities and irrigation districts from the Central Valley. Sonoma County is one of them, is a partner with us. And we joined in 2005 to really share our power that we get from the Western Area Power Administration. What happens is the federal projects have more power than they need in the project, and so they give it to the various partners that are with them. And so we each get an allocation of power. A lot of the ag districts get the power at the same time they don't need it because they spend a lot of power pumping their groundwater wells. And so in a wet year, they'll get a lot of power, but they won't need it because they have the water from the projects. And so in dry years, it's reverse. And so what we've done is we've come together and we pool our power resources, and what they like is they like the urban loads like ours in Sonoma's, where we have constant loads throughout the year, and then we share this power and make it more effective. So PURPA does a number of things as well. It is an electric utility. We can use it to build projects together in terms of power projects. We have some requirements to build alternative energy projects, and so we'll do that together as well. We also take revenue from our own sources and use it is required by state law then to use that money to look for efficiencies in our electrical system, and so we do that as well. So PURPA is kind of an important component of this. And you'll see our general manager, Ken Palmerton, is in a session this afternoon. I don't know if he's going to talk more about the organization or not. This will change a little bit, too, because we are coming online in terms of our pie chart. We are bringing an advanced water recycling plant online, an 8 MGD plant that is an RO plant. And so what you'll see is you'll probably see that green pie grow in the future as we bring some of those systems online. I just want to mention real quickly, so again, we're just the retailer, but as this shows, there's also energy that's used both in the home to distribute water as well, but also in the home, and then finally wastewater treatment. I think that's been touched upon already, but the home especially is a target area, not just the home, but businesses, where heating water requires a lot of energy as well, and then depending on the industrial use, it could create a lot of power load just to manage that. I'll skip that. In the future, where we're going, we just completed a water supply master plan that really looks out to the year 2035. And what we do is each of our agencies is required to do an urban water management plan where they look at a 20-year projection of their water use. They do that every 5 years. And so every 5 years, we take that same data and we take a larger look at where we're going. And so this is the results that came out of that. I think, as already mentioned, some of our baseline elements are very important in terms of what we need to do. We're heavily on recycling, heavy on water conservation, and of course you have to make some major capital improvements both for our responsibility in the Bay Delta fix, and also we have to fix some of our dams for seismic issues. But the final thing I really want to talk about is where we go in the future. Where our goal is really we don't want to have a call for rationing for more than 10% in any given year, and so we've set up projects that are due to do that. The most important one is really the one on the far right, is where we're looking at is instead of relying more on pumping from the Delta, we're really looking at making that investment and spending more money to actually do more indirect potable reuse in the future. We don't need that until about 10 or 15 years from now, but I think the most important thing is that this is a highly energy intensive system, and so it's probably about 50% more power needed to do this than it is to pump more from the Delta. And so with that concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Frank. All right. Let's move now to Michael Thompson with the Sonoma Valley Water Agency.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Mike Thompson with the Sonoma County Water Agency, and just tell you a little bit about our organization. We're, I guess, kind of a mini East Bay Mud in a way, in that we provide water, wholesale water. We actually operate 8 wastewater treatment plants, and we manage about 150 miles of streams and flood control channels. And that's actually one of my primary areas of responsibility is the flood control. And it was with that flood control eye that I watched the 9th inning of the Giants game the other night. And my favorite shot was when they pulled back and I could see the standing water on the field. And the game was interesting and everything, but I was looking, how is that draining? And so, I put a call into the Giants and offered my services for a front row seat, free of charge. Haven't heard back for the next game. I have to leave to go, stand by my phone waiting for that call, but I'm not sure that it'll come. With regard to our topic today, I'm going to, put out a couple ideas. One is that kind of another shameless plug, I guess, for water agencies in general, that I'd say that we're probably more responsive to a public's value, our community's value, than probably any other organization. I don't think Alex and Jim, would you disagree with that? No, I'm not seeing any disagreements there. The other is that I think the way that the water agencies operate now is very different than they used to be, and that we are operating them in a manner that's in tune with both the values and the goals of both our country, our state, and our regions. And I will talk a little bit about pricing, but and then one of the final things I'd like to leave with a question that we could maybe ask is that kind of if you take a step back and look at really, I think a lot of things that Cindy and Mark talked about, that is the strategy we're following one that's going to serve our region well in the future with regard to the business environment. So, but getting back to the values and why I think that our water agencies and water districts are so in tune with the communities they serve comes from several different reasons. One, if generally as a nation or as a state, there are certain things that become important to a country, to a state, and those generally then will turn into regulation, and those will become law. And as that, I think at the federal level, I think, as many of you know, we have the Army Corps of Engineers, we have the National Marine Fisheries Service, we have the National Fish and Wildlife Service, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, all aimed at improving and protecting our environment. And then in the state level, we have the State Water Resources Control Board. We have 9 regional water quality control boards. We have Department of Fish and Game, and I know I'm missing some others, but through
Caltrans.
And Caltrans. So through all of these through the laws get passed, get turned into regulation, those, and I think as Cindy said earlier, those have a huge effect on how water agencies provide the services that we do provide. The second piece, I think, is something Alex touched on earlier, is the fact that we all have publicly elected boards. And even if those public elected boards are made up of, obviously, the population they served. And, I think Alex mentioned, that 30 years ago, it was kind of the will of the community to have East Bay Mud begin serving or providing wastewater treatment services. And so in response to that, that's what happened. And I'd say the third reason that I would say water districts and water agencies in general are in tune is that a lot of the employees that serve those communities come from those communities. And so the odds are they share the same values. So I think you have, kind of a unique situation where you really do have these organizations that I think are closer in touch and closer reflect the values of their communities, and I'm going to submit than any other organization that you're likely to find. The topic of our talk obviously is the effect of water pricing on the economy, and I'll readily admit I'm not an expert on that, but I'll also admit I can read. And luckily, we had a report done for us in 2009 by Dr. Robert Eiler with Sonoma State University that looked at just that. And it was and I actually did read that yesterday and pulled out a few key points I'd like to share with you. which I found pretty interesting. One, which I think probably is not surprising to anyone, is that the demand for water is pretty inelastic, especially in the residential area, that as you increase the cost of water, really does not change the demand for the water. You don't see demand dropping, and so there really isn't a significant price signals there. That's different with regard to businesses. Businesses do make economic changes, do make changes in the way they operate based on water prices. But one of the things that was found there is that water, with the most intensive water users, which would be golf courses, manufacturing, areas like that, they actually don't change their water use that much depending on price. Do you see that more in the areas that it seemed odd? And I had to read this section 2 or 3 times to make sure that's what it said, but it did. The other interesting thing is said only, and I think you're aware, only a tiny fraction of the water used in California is actually for health and safety and for preserving human life. Most of it is for, as they said in this report, is for convenience, pleasure, and comfort, and which is, again, it's somewhat surprising, but that's where most of it goes. The biggest impact, though, that they found wasn't so much on the economy, isn't with regard to the price of water, but it is with regard to reliability, like Cindy was talking about. And in fact, what Dr. Eiler found in our area, in the area that Sonoma County serves, is that, for example, a 10% shortage or a shortage brought on either by natural hazard, by drought, or by regulatory constraints, 10% drop would represent about $200 million of loss to the economy. 20% loss would be about a $400 million drop to our economy. Interestingly, though, when you get to 30% and it gets pretty severe, he estimated the drop would be $5 billion. So really the biggest kind of message there is that it's the reliability. And I think you see from water districts, throughout this area, that we're taking great steps to ensure the reliability of our system. I know that East Bay Mud is leading the charge, I believe, to look at trying to bring together all of the water districts in the Bay Area to make sure that their systems can intertie in case of emergency. I know we're all working on projects to increase our resiliency to natural disasters. And that's, I think, a key component. The other piece that I think that has really changed is that when most of our districts were formed, many, many years ago, our main task was involved with the movement of water and providing water to our customers. And we've added something else so that when you're buying a glass of water or a gallon of water, you're still paying obviously for the cost of delivering it, but you're also going to be paying for the restoration of the environmental impacts that our systems might have. And so you'll see, probably we're one of the leading funders, I would think, of watershed restoration and watershed protection in the state. And that's another key component. The other piece that was mentioned earlier too is water conservation, and it's I think also one of the interesting things about water districts. We have a completely different model than any private sector. I don't think you'll ever hear Apple coming out and saying, "No, don't buy our new iPad. Your old one's just fine," and use less of it. And from that standpoint, yeah, we operate very differently. As I think Cindy said, and I looked at the price, our water that the water agency produces is at a wholesale level is about 0.2 cents, I think, per gallon. And that people will buy bottled water at almost 1,000 times that amount. So from a private sector, if this is a private sector organization, you'd say you've got a huge upside for profit here. And I think that's one of the advantages of having our systems be actually publicly owned. And so from the water conservation, I think that's a huge benefit to having these systems be public and to continue to invest in those. One of the areas we're most proud of at the Water Agency also is in our public education program, which addresses youth and schools, in that in the last several years we've seen education cut drastically, and a lot of the enhancements that go along with most education programs have been cut. And so more and more water districts are also providing some of the enhancements to our local schools, which I think is very important. So the question, I guess, that I would pose, that kind of through those three strategies, essentially you're investing in your water resources, in your infrastructure, we're investing in the environment, and we're investing in our communities. And I'd like to think that's going to make our systems really more competitive long term in the world environment by investing in those areas. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. Now I'd like to turn to our last panelist this morning, Spivy-Weber.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm pleased to be here following the various speakers that you've had, because they make some of the points that I'm going to make much easier. I come from a regulatory organization that is focused on water quality and water rights. That's our mission. You come from Sonoma County Water Agency, focused on certain activities that were identified. All of you come from a particular place. You might emphasize supply. You might emphasize, as Alex was talking about, supply was how they started. Then they added wastewater. Now they're doing energy. They've taken on fisheries management. And so, and almost everyone is going, in terms of the water world, is going in this direction. They're much more alert to energy issues and environmental issues. But the point that was made right at the end of Michael's presentation is where we're heading forward, and that is community. Because we're finding that in our worlds, even when they are multitasking and multi-sector, we can't accomplish what we are tasked to do if we aren't reaching out broader, in a broader way, to those in our community. And our community could be our region, it could be Northern California, it could be the state of California, it could be the West, it could be the country, it could be various parts of the world. So that's the clear message that I want to emphasize today, and one that we at the Water Board are taking quite seriously, because we want to have water quality. We're not going to get water quality just through regulation. We're not going to get to water quality just through bond measures. We're not going to get to water quality just through fees and our activities. We're going to have to get to water quality with a strategy that puts all of you to work figuring out what is the best way to achieve your goals and our goals and someone else's goals at the same time, with many times the same amount of money and occasionally even less money. So now sometimes it costs more money, and so that's where the balance comes. And you'll be hearing from other people in other panels that follow us who can elaborate on this, but that's where I see the future. And it is in water supply world language, integrated regional water management planning. I see Lester in the back of the room, and he'll certainly be able to talk a lot more about that, where they emphasize water quality, water supply, fisheries, and also environmental justice, and now energy. But the basin plans for the water boards have this kind of integrated water management idea. The Bay Planning Commission has that as a task as well. So the question, the real challenge to all of us here is, how do we accomplish our missions of the organizations that we represent in a way that enhances others' ability to accomplish their missions that may be different from ours. They may be compatible, but they may be totally different. And usually, if we're going to do something different, if we're going to reach out and have to work with other people and learn new languages and figure out kind of new social ways of operating together, we're doing it for a reason. We don't always just do it because we think it's fun. Some of us do, but very few. Usually we do it because there's a drought. There's scarcity. There's climate change coming on board. We do it because the cost of energy is going up and it's affecting the price of water. We do it because there's a new regulation that is increasing the cost associated with improving the environment. We do it because there is some threat to our area, sea level rise, for example, in this area, and so the motivations are there. And when those motivations come along, it's a wonderful opportunity to embrace those motivations and turn to what could actually end up being something very, very positive. For example, in our focus here is on pricing. If you're looking at the cost of water and the price signal that's sending, and as the energy, as the price of energy, which is embedded in the price of water, if that's just passed through to your customers, and they aren't aware of the connection between the water and the energy and what they are doing and what you are doing, it's very hard for them to not blame you for raising the price of water, even if it's just in response to energy. So providing a good, accurate information as to what it is you are providing to your customers and what it takes to run your system, I think is extremely important. Another example is if in Southern California, we just had a presentation at a group that I'm a part of from the city of Burbank, and they pride themselves on their operation and maintenance work on their pipes. They are systematically putting in pressure reducers or controllers on all of their pipes so that when they send their crews out, their crews are going out to put in mechanisms that allow their pipes to last the 300 years the pipes should be able to last, because they can manipulate the pressure and reduce the strain on the pipes themselves and not have to send their crews out to work on fixing leaks. They have their leak percentage down below 2%. Now that is not an industry average. 10% is what AWWA used to say. I don't know what they're saying these days, but they used to say 10% was okay. Well, below 2% is, according to Burbank, is doable and is cost effective. So if you're paying, if your customers are getting a price signal that includes not paying attention to the operation and maintenance, to the practices of kind of good housekeeping, that's not a real fair signal to them. And it's certainly not something that and it's a way, if you're staying on top of these things, it's a way of keeping your prices down. I'll also add that Burbank has the lowest utility rates in the area. They do power and water. But there's another benefit here, and that is the energy that it takes to replace that leakage has a cost associated with it too. So if you're reducing your leaks, you're making your system more efficient, you're using your personnel in a constructive way that is giving good value to the customer. But if you're also not having to pump more water into Southern California to cover those leaks, then you are doing a good job. And I guess the final point that I would make is that you need to be focusing on what is the real need. Sometimes we do things because we've always done them, and sometimes we do them because the law says we are supposed to be doing these things. But in fact, sometimes there are ways of doing things, and we've learned that with recycled water. You don't always have to use potable water for something. You can use recycled water for agriculture. You can use recycled water for running industrial operations. You can use recycled water for many, many purposes. You can use it more than one time. You can, and so we need to get more creative. We need to be working together in larger units with people who are like us, but then people who are different from us, so that we can create a picture, a vision for the future that will solve some of the threats, some of the stresses, some of the pressures that are pushing us to have to make changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran. All right, so now we get into the real fun here. We'll have about 15 minutes for a Q&A session right here. I'm going to wrap up actually at 9:41 so that I can give each of the panelists 60 seconds to provide their kind of closing and their take-home message. So remember, if you have some questions, please fill out the blue cards, raise your hand. We'll have somebody go around to get you one. So already there have been some really good questions that have come up. And a lot of these I'm trying to categorize because I think there's some similar ideas here. So the first one I'd like to do is talk a little bit about economy. And this would be for any of the panelists to talk about. There have been a number of reports that have been commissioned over the years. I saw one in Alex's presentation. There was a footnote for one from the mid-2000s or so. Mike, you had mentioned one from Sonoma State. I know there was a Wharton School of Business from University of Pennsylvania in March of 2011, et cetera, that are talking about the water economy tie-ins. So one question that we face often here in California are water shortages, or at least we have in the past. I know there's a lot of effort to promote reliability so that even if our Sierra snowpack is down or there is an infrastructure disruption due to an earthquake, we still have a reliable source. But for each of you, can you tell us a little bit about what you have seen as far as the real impact on business and economy? It could be in pricing, it could be in just distribution of goods, et cetera, when there is a water shortage. What have you seen in the past? Do you have any examples of that?
Well, I think in our area, I think one of the biggest example of impact of water shortages and really from drought is for our wine industry. So for us, I mean, it's a huge financial hit. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I think you see it in that, and for us, tourism is a big part of our economy. And when we looked at the shortage of the impact of drought, those were the main areas that were identified were in the tourism and the agriculture in those areas. But I think some of the things what we're doing to help kind of soften that is, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is by diversifying our essentially our portfolio of water, where in our area, and I think Francis touched on this with the use of recycled water, we're looking at really having a portfolio made up of 4 sources of water, which includes our regular surface water supplies, groundwater, and we consider recycled water and water conservation as really significant supplies of water that would help kind of reduce those impacts of the water shortages.
I would just add, I heard from a distillery that uses water. It's the biggest component of what they sell. They sell worldwide, and it was a beer that was extremely popular. But they were trying to look at their water footprint. They weren't coming at it from a scarcity perspective, but it translates to the same thing. And so they were saying, "Oh my goodness!" They looked at the kinds of the kind of grain that they were putting into this beer, and it was huge in its use of water. What they ended up doing is they found another kind of less water consume. In fact, it was only used a quarter of the water to grow the grain that they used. They used their R&D to make sure that taste to the customer didn't change, and they packaged this new type of this new beer in the same old bottle, putting the appropriate labeling on, and found no change in popularity of the beer, but they were using a lot less water, and they were saving huge amounts of money. Their bottom line looked great. They wouldn't have gone there if they hadn't decided they wanted to have a smaller water footprint. So I'm saying the creativity and the innovation is there to not just have reliability, but to have resilience, to be able to actually deal with the ups and downs that we're going to be facing in the future.
Yes.
When you talk about water shortage and the economy in California, one of the critical areas is in the San Joaquin Valley. Some of the counties there their economy is so tied to agriculture. When there is a water shortage, that has a huge impact on their local economies. And as you all know, some of the unemployment areas in some of those counties is very, very high, in the 20% numbers as opposed to what we have statewide. And that is why I think some in agriculture and the water community really feel that storage is a critical component that we need to be looking at, so that when we have water, we can be storing that for years where we don't have water. And it's not just for ag and, again, for drinking water, it's for environmental protection as well. In the bond, there's $3 billion for storage currently, and that's in part why that's there, because of the past drought situation.
Great.
And I think for us, we have seen in the last drought a significant reduction in industrial water use. A lot of that has, as the high-tech firms are shifting more from manufacturing to research and development. I think that's a big reason. I don't know if it's just water supply or there's other economic factors that are looking at manufacturing leaving the valley.
Before we leave this question, I wonder if we can go back to the slide, Frank, that you showed with regards to the South Bay and the businesses that populate. I think it was your second slide.
Your first slide.
I think it was your first slide. Yeah. Okay. So we heard from Cindy. We heard from Mike a little bit from Francis about agriculture, with respect to pricing. But here we have some of the businesses that are probably the most global businesses on anywhere. We hear about them every day, whether it's new products, whether it's about how they're doing, as far as the stock market, how they hire or not. So my question kind of to Frank a little bit, and then everybody else, we also hear about, I'll call it lobbying going on between various water users, Sacramento and the federal government, as far as making sure that they have reliable supply and good pricing. We hear that from the agricultural industry, perhaps sometimes more because of the demand. I don't hear it as much from some of these businesses. And I'm wondering if there is anything going on as far as these types of businesses talking to the various agencies about reliability and what we can do or what needs to be done to assure that, their processes are maintained.
Yeah, we do have a relationship with industries. I think it's the Silicon Valley Manufacturing Group that we work with, and when things do come up, whether it's the issues on the Delta and whatnot, they do support us and weigh in from time to time as they see fit. So it's not, as Cindy was saying, water and in the Central Valley, water is so critical to that economy, so they're very active politically. To the extent that they need to be, they're active as well with us and supporting us in Sacramento.
In Southern California, we have not the same industries. We would love to have some of them down there, but we have a lot of refineries and other kinds of industries that use water and use water in a technical way that where the quality really does matter. And recycled water, particularly West Basin, has specialized in producing recycled water in what they call designer water. They have 5 flavors of recycled water. Some that is it's practically just H2O. It doesn't really, you couldn't put it in your pipes because it would just destroy your pipes. And then some that is less pure, if you will. And so I think the alternative water options, and I would put stormwater and rainwater and flood into the mix in the future, that there are ways of having these alternatives meet and perhaps surpass the quality that the industries need because of the technical capacity for filtering and for treating and that sort of thing.
Thank you. I want to shift a little bit to communications and community outreach and how we actually get this information out to the public as well as to the business community. You've talked about some of those specifically, but we've had some questions here that talk about, for example, the differences between the domestic use and the industrial use. We're in a inelastic demand for home use versus some of the other stuff. One of the questions is, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on some of the methods that you are using to better educate the public? I mean, we have the water bond issue, which is going to be a huge communication effort. We've already seen it over the years. And then locally to try and better, I mean, I think Californians are actually fairly well educated in water, but there's probably a certain level that we are at, but we need to get to perhaps even better. Can you perhaps, any one of you, elaborate on what you are seeing and what you need to do and maybe what the most important thing is to get out to the public?
Well, I think one of the, I think I touched on this earlier. I think one of the most effective methods of actually communication and education is starting with children at a very young age. And so I think one of the things we've seen in the industry in the last several years, there's been several articles talking about where is all the residential water demand gone. We've seen the water agency we have seen about over a 25% drop in the amount of water demand on our system. We don't know if it's part of plumbing code or if it's that, these education programs that we started 15, 20 years ago we're seeing the payoff of those, that, we have essentially a younger generation that are now getting into their own homes, and they have been brought up kind of in a water-wise environment. And so we think that's probably one of the most effective ways, is just through that change there. It's a kind of an interesting question. We were talking about this the other day. I was actually over with Dave Boland at Aqua, and I think he made a very good point, is that, most of our organizations are made up of engineers, and we're generally not, I'm an engineer, and we're generally not the best communicators in the world. And so it's hard to believe, but it's, and so actually, I think one of the biggest steps is actually hiring communication specialists and people who, that's what we do. We happen to have 2 who are incredible in the way they are able to craft a message that, they can take, these arcane engineering and technical details, a lot of which we're talking about today, and making them accessible to the public. And so I think a big part of it is having, either finding the right expertise, finding people that specialized in communication, and making sure that's who's doing it.
I would add that you have to, there's kind of, I would divide it, communication in 2 areas and then a third. First, internally, I think that you need to make sure that you know what you're talking about, that you've done your audits on efficiency, that you've done your audits on energy as well as water, and that you're communicating with your customers through their billing system. They do look at their bills. And is it gibberish, or is it something that they can really get feedback as to how they are doing to help you and their community achieve what they want? And then we heard rebates. Sometimes we use rebates to do that. if you're trying to do something community-wide, I think Orange County saw that going to all the different civic clubs, it's kind of anyone who gathered in groups of more than 3, and getting resolutions passed in support of their water replenishment, groundwater replenishment, recycled water program, helped to build a whole community that through their various other areas figured out kind of what to do. But third is sometimes communicating is expensive and difficult. You do it for emergencies sometimes, and but it kind of wears down after a while. So getting standards and getting code changes and getting your laws to line up with your values is a way of being able to make sure you are focusing your outreach on those things that truly aren't able to be automatic, if you will.
I just say that one thing that Aqua does is we help our members on communications. We have a good communication staff within our association. I'm an engineer. Certainly in engineering, we didn't learn anything about communication. But at Aqua, we really focus on all the different tools, whether it's the newspaper. Recently, John Coleman and our president, Randy Record, had a great piece in the Sacramento Bee. That's one approach. But we just hired a new staff person who's our social media person. And they're on Facebook, they're tweeting, and they give guidance to our members on how you can do this. We blog. So we try to use all the different tools, and it's just important to do that so that you reach all the different audiences.
I was just going to add, too, we have a very sophisticated and fairly large communications group that really helps support us, and that they really take a structured approach as, first, who's your audience, what is your message, what is the right communication device to do it. It's fairly straightforward analysis, and I think we do a very effective. In fact, we've been criticized for having too many of those, actually, from some of the press. Why do you have so many communication staff there? But I think they're very valuable. We're also on Twitter, especially in emergencies. I can see that as a very valuable tool of getting information out quickly to people during an emergency as to what situations are. Just in my own, I also oversee our dam safety program. We had some seismic issues, and so I've been on television a lot, and they've held my hand of what's your message, what are your 3 main points, and they work with us to really respond to it. So I think really looking at, who's your audience and what's your message is very important.
Thank you. We've had some questions about, for example, how do you get the message out that tap water is safe and healthy and, good for you and all that stuff. And I know that all the districts put out their annual reports. Just real quick question. Do you think the public reads those?
Not too many.
No. Just how many here read their annual reports that they get at home? We have
that's about right. About
Really high.
Yeah, it probably is. Maybe 25% of you raised your hand.
Okay. We have a lot of other great questions here, and we're going to try and maybe respond to those later so that we can keep on time. We have a few minutes before we want to wrap up this session. So I'm going to allow each of the panelists to give their 60 seconds to kind of take us home. I might ask the panelists also in their closing arguments if they have any questions they want to ask each other. They can do that too, or just kind of keep it open. And why don't we start? We'll start in reverse direction. We'll start with Fran this time.
Okay, I think I only have one recommendation or one summary statement, and that is we need to be working to integrate our mission, whatever it is, into the fabric of the community and work with others to achieve both our mission and theirs at the same time. When we are siloed, we are going to be defeated.
And I guess along those same lines, our philosophy at the Water Agency is we're looking to essentially secure our future by investing in water resources in the environment and the community, which is very consistent with what you just said. And I think that is, one of the questions I posed earlier, is that going to provide our region with a long-term strategic advantage? And my hope is that it will.
Just to wrap up, too, energy, and when you look at the energy and water nexus for us, our energy bill, I think, is similar to East Bay Mud. It's very small in terms of a percentage, but I think it's very important that we take the lead and do things right, because as you look at global climate change and the impact on that, it has a tremendous effect both on water supply and, in our case, flood management. And so I think we need to be seen as leaders. And so even though it doesn't save us that much money to be as more efficient, I think to show that we're doing everything that we can gives us a certain amount of credibility as we address those other issues.
And I think I'd just restate one of the points that I made, that reliability is key, but it's not just key for business and for the public, it's also key for our ecosystems in the state. So we need to meet both of those goals at the same time.
Great, thank you. And I assume that once this current political cycle is done, we'll hear about the water bond as a big communication push probably going forward. All right, with that, I would like to thank our panelists, Cindy Tuck, Frank Maitski, Mike Thompson, and Friend Spivy-Weber very much.